Talking about the broader U.S. economy, let's look back at housing for a moment here. We had housing take another hit today. Existing home sales in May came in at their lowest level in 6 months, but better than forecast. Still, it is a sign that we may have a long road to go before real recovery in real estate. Joining us now is Demir Jokai, senior home builder and real estate analyst with Majestic Research. And these numbers, while not completely off the mark, did show some of the regions in the country are starting to improve. Is that a good sign to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really what's interesting here is if you unpack the number and you start to look at the regions, one of the things we'd gone to our clients talking about at the early part of the year was that this overall national number is going to continue to look bad. And that's just because you've got a lot of markets that continue to deteriorate. But there are markets in it that are getting better. You're starting to see Miami, Washington, San Antonio, Houston, all of these places are seeing volumes pick up, and they're also seeing a lot of pricing strength, or pricing at least getting less bad. So in general, when you unpack this number, you start to see a regional story that sort of belies the national number. You know, I mean, if you look at some of the key cities, Miami, Phoenix of all places, even New York, those seem to be where you're seeing a little bit of a build. Having said that, lending is still a problem. And the report, the NAR, did point that out today as still a major issue. How crucial is that in your mind? And where are we in that point of the recovery, do you think? Well, lending is absolutely crucial. I mean, we sort of know at this point it's not going to get very easy, but it could be much easier. We're hearing a lot of anecdotal stories about people getting turned away at the gate for simple documentation issues. So there could be some easing on that point. At the end of the day, I think what the positives are here is that we're seeing a lot of people crowd into renting in these new household formations. As it gets more expensive to rent, and relative to owning, I think you could get some pent-up demand here that'll shift over into owning. The problem on the owning side, especially for the home builders, if you want to talk about the home builders, is that there's just so much product out there. Not in every segment, but at least on that bottom end, there's so much product that the first person to the table to eat is going to be existing homes and then new homes.
Well, I tell you what, Rob Basso, you're the payroll guy. I mean, if you don't have a job, you're not going to be able to keep a mortgage, buy a new home. That's the issue here.
No, but I think part of the thing that we haven't discussed, and I'd like to ask a question to Demir. The federally backed loans you can go up to as high as $729,000 right now, but both sides of the aisle seem to think that limit is way too high, and they're seriously considering cutting it. What will that do to the entire home market if that limit is lowered, and why would they do it?
Well, I mean, quantifying it would be hard, but there's no doubt that it would be a negative, another incremental negative into the market. I think that negative, though, it's a little too easy to get really behind that and say, oh, it's going to crush everything. I mean, there's clearly a lot of new households forming. There's clearly a lot of people crowding into renting. So the more renting gets expensive relative to buying, you'll still see some demand for homes. The problem is, I think exactly what you said. This is clearly going to be an incremental negative if some of that type of legislation gets passed.
You know, Kimberly, one of the things I saw in the data I found intriguing is that folks are actually checking out, looking at new homes. At the end of the day, they're buying an existing home. Maybe the data didn't quite reflect that today. The year-over-year comparisons were a little rough, and I'll explain that in a moment. But at the same time, it wasn't a new home. It's an existing home. So there's deals out there.
There are deals to be made. In fact, I was doing a little survey of it this weekend, so you can take a look at the market, talking to some brokers, etc. But you're also seeing a large part of the market, like 30% of sales that are happening are foreclosed properties, people who are upside down and the bank takes it over. Those are always a very labor-intensive process to buy it. I think until we clear all that out, then we're going to be able to see things start to readjust and get back where they were.
Distressed home sales, certainly a piece of this, Nicole Pedalides. But again, and he just brought this up, the home builders themselves, the new home builders. It looks like folks, from what the NAR told us this morning, they're going in, but they're not buying a new home. They're looking, but they're not buying.
Well, when we look at all these home numbers, all you have to do is note that the housing market is pretty much stagnant. The home builders, the stocks themselves have been holding up pretty nicely here today. They sold off a little bit ahead of the number, but they've held on. But big picture with this economy the way it is, housing is obviously the worst of the bunch when we talk about what's going on here and double dip recession. I mean, the housing sector overall is certainly quite vulnerable. That being said, we have so many other factors, right? Jobs and even those who have jobs, wages versus inflation. And big picture, we still have our Greece story. I just saw that now the IMF is concerned too about Spain. That crossed just now as we are all chatting. So all of these things are all factored together. It's such a global market at this point.
All right, Nicole Pedalides, Phil Flynn, Demir Jokai, senior home builder and real estate analyst with Majestic Research. Of course, thanks to all of you. Appreciate the commentary on these homes.